Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to another Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for joining us for episode 122. Just a reminder, this weekend we will be at the Michigan Atheist Convention in Farmington Hills. You could come check us out and a lot of other great speakers. Tonight, we kind of wanted to do a split show. It'll be a little bit shorter of a show as we're preparing for the convention. We're going to be talking about the atheist movement. Has it moved towards the alt-right? Or has it always really just kind of been there and maybe just not been discovered? We're also going to be talking about a new proposal by Bill Shootee and how much we love that individual and his new proposal. But we thought to begin the show, we kind of start talking a little bit about newspapers, right? And newspapers have kind of been a thing that's gone off. And what kind of triggered this was the whole Sinclair discussion about the news and what's happened to printed media versus digital media. Hannah, I don't know. I guess you tell me. Do you feel that if the media continues going the way it's going with what we've seen with the Sinclair thing, that people will move back to newspapers?
Money, people would start reading the newspaper again, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And people would start doing periodicals again. So that's the question. It's like, so like for what you would pay for a magazine subscription would be, you know, a month access to all of NPR's content or whatever.
The only problem would be is that I have with that is the reason I never bought magazines before, right? There's a reason I never did that. Because
I have subscriptions. I have 3 different magazines. I had Game Informer, Maxim, and Playboy.
See, I never had subscription. I guess I had, you know, the Game Informer when I was a kid and Nintendo Power when I was a kid. But that was it. I mean, I didn't pay for the paper. My parents paid for the paper quite a bit.
Yeah,
but
my dad,
I wouldn't because I don't trust it, you know?
My dad still gets paper every day here at the shop.
I mean, I just would not trust the paper, you know, for what I was doing. You know, like how do I know they're an unbiased source? Right now, the beauty of the internet is it gives me 100 million links I can read.
Yeah. I don't know, like, they're usually, you know, kind of the lean. So like in Detroit, there's the Detroit News, which leans to the right, and the Free Press, which leans to the left. And so like I read the Free Press. My dad reads the Free Press too.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's center left. It's relatively trustworthy though. That's the thing. Like I know the reputation because I've been reading it for 10 years. So like it's a trustworthy rag. Like I mean, I wouldn't be able to call it 100%. You know, like no question. But like if that was my only source of information, I would be comfortable with it because they do a pretty good job.
Yeah, it would just turn into people buying podcasts and people's opinions and stuff like that. That's what would happen.
Well, that's what I mean. Is like go back to like pay like a magazine subscription for all of MTR stuff. So all of their NPR One stuff, all of the podcasts they put out, and then like whether or not that would leak into like having Planet Money and all the other stuff that they broadcast as well. I don't know.
Then I guess if I had to choose one, so are we playing this like, you know, one dare draw or something like that, right? Well, it would be BBC. Yeah. I would support BBC 100%. Like I would be the only reason
the only reason that the BBC is tough is because it is so far away that you're not going to get any local stuff out of it. That's the only reason I shy away from BBC and I go to Michigan radio is because I get the local news and local stuff. Because as much as it's important to know what's going on in Tanzania, it's just like I had to stick to what's going on in Michigan.
Yeah, I would agree, except for the fact that, again, it goes back to how do I make sure I remain unbiased, right?
Yeah.
And that would be the hardest thing
Well, the hardest thing would be to be unbiased. You'd have to just have a few sources. The BBC's got so much money that you can get a lot of randoms, but I don't know. Like, if you wanted to go that route, then you could do the AP, because the AP is a conglomerate that basically grabs BBC and NPR and all those other groups together. But
the question would be, though, could the AP even exist in that world, though? Right? Think about it, because it's kind of, because think about it, all they are is just a reblog site, right? They're, how do I bring what you want to you? It's kind of like, a Comcast network.
Well, then it would be like, it'd be like HBO and Comcast, right? Like,
no, it would be like HBO, because HBO makes their own content. Comcast does not make any content.
Yeah, so Comcast would be like AP.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. So, like, you pay money to AP to have access to more information, and AP gives some of that money back to all the individuals. And so, like BBC would benefit from AP, because maybe some of the people who would pay a little bit to AP to have more would never just get BBC. I don't know. I was just thinking about it earlier today, and I was just like, I wonder if like everything went back to close like that. Because I mean, I would just continue reading the newspaper as I do, but
yeah, and I don't disagree with reading the newspaper if you could guarantee you're going to get an unbiased source. But I don't feel that I still feel they're tainted in some aspects. And now maybe this would push it so they wouldn't be, right? But this kind of goes back to what's the viral video that was on John Oliver that's everybody's sharing right now about the one network.
Sinclair.
There you go. And everybody's freaking out because they asked them to read the same thing. And everybody's like, oh, this is so spooky. And it's like, well, okay, so fine. That's pretty spooky. Mm-hmm. I won't lie, that's weird. But let's take all those same networks and line all the stories up and see how many stories are the same compared to other news networks. So let's say you have 75% of the world of the country's news comes from these networks and 25% comes from the other. What's the percentage of story difference between the two? Because think about it this way. If all they're reporting for the most part is just what's popular or what's trending at the time, chances are they're not going to force feed a bunch of garbage down our throats, right? I mean, it just seems a little conspiratorial to me. That's all.
Did you watch the full John Oliver segment?
Yeah, I have HBO, so.
Okay, yeah, because like that segment came out a while ago, but like people have been talking about Sinclair basically monopolizing local media and local news stations, and some of the things that they do is like they force the local news stations to play some of their centralized content, which is the stuff that's got the real heavy Roger Ailes Fox News feel to it. That's the stuff that's freaking people out. So like what they're seeing is they're seeing these guys that are saying like it's like when you look at Comcast and Time Warner, and you hear Comcast is fighting net neutrality, and you're like, man, I don't really like that. But Comcast is like, hey, no, we're okay. See, like we're just doing a little bit here and just a little bit there. And they slowly gather enough data and enough power, and then eventually they can just say, well, we have it all already. And since the United States doesn't really seem to deal with antitrust laws anymore, that they're just thinking that they do the slow climb enough to the point where it's, hey, we're too big to fail. If Sinclair Media is attacked, that will just shut down 70% of the United States, local news channels or something. I don't know what their ultimate strategy is, but that's something that I think that they're going to try.
Really? I don't know, man. I don't know. That's kind of odd. That maybe it could happen, right? I guess Trump gets his military parade, for Christ's sake. So yeah, I mean, maybe he could take over. So how about this? How much is Sinclair tied to Trump at all, or to the GOP party? I mean, I know they're very right leaning, but are they actually physically tied to that party?
I don't know if they're actually doing any donations to the GOP or anything like that, but basically what it is kind of like, could you say Fox News is tied to the GOP or tied to Donald Trump? Loosely. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, you really think about it, like the money, the people that are people that are in the money, that are tied to the the conservative angles. So you start seeing people like Roger Ailes. I guarantee he used to be a huge supporter of it. And I mean, I don't know for certain if they they have a good track of what he's been doing. But like, if you go to opensecrets.org, have you ever heard of that site?
I have not. I'm Googling it right now. OpenSecrets.org.
Yeah. They had information on Sinclair Broadcast Group, and they've got a listing of all of their contributions to political and lobbying interests. So they got almost $500,000 in lobbying interest.
Oh wow!
They are
all right. So hold on. Where do you find this? I gotta know where you find this on here. So I'm in here, and then you have to search for Sinclair.
Yeah, Sinclair Broadcast Group in the search for an organization section, and it just talks about what they're doing and how they do it. This is my
crap. Yeah, you're right.
This is my go-to. But here's the thing is that they've got almost $50,000 to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. So like,
yeah.
So they're kind of weird. We don't really know exactly what they're doing. I would put them more towards the thing that is the fears of the monopolistic. So like, I fear them more, not so much for their spin, the conservative angle, than I do from just a monopolistic angle. Like, I just don't like one company owning tons of news.
Now, if you look at the ratios, right, between the Dems and the Republicans, it's pretty consistent, except for in 1 year, in 2010, and then if you go all the way back to the 90s, it picks up. But for the most part, it's 20 to 30% in that range there for Democrats. And Republicans, there's a couple of years, the Republicans, they're hitting almost 100% donations from 2000 to 2008. Holy crap. Now, also the donation ranges, if you look at the dollars, that's crazy because those dollars raise up during, campaign years, it looks like. And then they've raised up extremely high over the last, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, and so it makes you wonder, really. It's the Sinclair Media Group. It has grown exponentially in the last couple of years. I mean, it's not like something that's been around for a long time. Like, it has existed for a while, but the corporation itself has really made a big push. And so you see some of these things, and so this makes you wonder, right? So like Chris Van Hollen, the Democrat from Maryland, he got $28,000. It makes you wonder. It's like, okay, so this is a Democrat who's taking money from a pretty big corporation, who has pretty center right to openly right general directives in their corporation. What is this Democrat? Where is his position at? I mean, this is where they talk about Democrats being center to center right, and the entire Republican Party has shifted to the right. So a center right Republican is now what used to be just a right wing Republican, and the right wing Republicans are they're off there in La La Land next to Sarah Palin watching Russia from her backyard. This is and so like, this is another area where it's just like, we know this corporation and this group supports a lot of very conservative things, and they don't seem to have any problems with antitrust stuff. So like they love that capitalistic ideal, and they want to own more and more. They just put a bid in. They've actually been refused a few times to buy more and more. In this big video that went out, that I think it was put on by the Blaze. I'm not sure which company is the one that did that accumulated aggregated video where everybody's saying the same thing at the same time. But they
wait, that was the Blaze that did that?
It was something. It was a website that's yeah. I know. Well, yeah. I'm not. I could be wrong. I couldn't. So if anyone knows specifically, whatever. But
that's crazy.
Anyways, So crazy. I mean, that makes you wonder what a Democrat's getting out of that. Chuck Schumer, he took money from him. Everybody knows he's center at best.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and the funny thing, Hannah, though, right? They take money for a lobbying, and the big thing here, right, is that lobbying sucks. You and I both know lobbying sucks for the most part. The problem is, though, is lobbying would hurt the other side of the coin too. Some interest on our side that we would lose out on if we didn't have lobbying. But it is very interesting to see why these people specifically, and these are what should be coming up when they do their rerunning their campaigns. People should be like, why are you taking money from this group? Why do you take money from this group? What is going into this? Specifically.
Transparency. We've heard about that. I mean, from police forces to congression. Everybody's heard the NASCAR jacket, right? Everybody who's running for an office should have to wear a patch from all of their major PACs. All the PACs that contribute to their campaign, they should have like a patch on their shoulder so you know who's giving what or something, that full transparency, visibility. Because Republicans, Democrats, I don't care who you are. If you're taking corporate money, I don't like you. Like even the Democrats, you know what I mean? If you're taking big fat corporate checks, I am just naturally skeptical of whether or not you're looking out for me or the people who paid to get you there. This company is another example of they lean right. I have issues with them, but in the end, unregulated media monopolies make me uncomfortable. The only way you can get to the big brother nanny state is via these channels, letting something get so big that it can't fail. And letting one company own all of, because like people don't watch, Fox News and stuff like that when they're at home in the evenings. Well, not people, but just there's a lot of people that still just watch their.
Are
local,
they people or not people, Hannah? Which is it?
It's people that just watch their nightly news.
Okay, so they are people.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure
they're not like aliens or something.
I don't know. I saw. What's the Obey movie where the guy wears the glasses and he can see?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure we're not all robots, but in the end, when it comes to it, it's just like people. There's a lot of people who still like just to get their local 9 o'clock news, and that's like a nice little independent thing. There's local newscasters, and everybody still thinks, hey, that's just the local channel. That's the local CBS, Fox affiliate, whatever. And this company is kind of running this shadow, and they're getting their claws in there, and they're kind of perverting a little news story about the local guy who helped out the high school or something. I would think that those kinds of stories would get pushed aside for something that would be more in tune with whatever scope or message this corporation wants to put out once it owns all the little places. Like all that I mean, the great example is that video that script that everybody had to read. Like if you're watching it, and you don't know anything about this station, you might think, oh wow, they're really making a push, and they want to try to increase journalistic integrity. But then you watch it, and everybody is talking about fake news and not checking your sources. And when you hear like everyone say it, it just should make you a little skeptical whether or not anybody's running propaganda through this or if this is sincere and honest. It's just, I don't know.
Exactly. It's kind of like.
There's a skeptic in us, right?
Yeah, it's a skeptic. It's kind of like the next story that we want to talk about. Shoot, I don't know if you say it. Bill Shoot unveils proposal to boost
Shootee
states literacy, right? You would think that would get news, especially in our town. But guess what? I've not heard of that until you posted it from the Detroit News. I never heard of this. This isn't something that's even trending. That was trending on any of the news channels.
Bill Shootee is the current GOP frontrunner for the gubernatorial race for Michigan.
Yeah. He's a shitlord. That's what he is. He's a horrible person. I hate him. I get his emails, by the way, but I do hate him.
Bill Shootee is the equivalent of Vern Troyer to Dr. Evil. He's just he's a crusty, creepy little dude who will do just about anything to get elected. And I mean, there's a thing in the Pink News thing where they're basically talking about, or in the Electablog thing where they're basically talking about he's been running for office for the last decade. It feels like the guy is just, he sold his soul to the Trump machine, and he thinks that that's what it's going to be. And we're trying to see whether or not in Michigan, if that Republican trend is going to hold true, if all of our gerrymandering holds true, because a lot of times after a long term with a Republican governor, you see the party switch, and I don't know if Michigan's ready to switch, but they're definitely not going to go with Brian Calley, who is the lieutenant governor, who wants he's got Rick Snyder's endorsement. But he's just, I think the last time that what is it? Lieutenant governor has been elected in Michigan. Was like 1918 or something, 1908. Like it's like re-electing the same exact administration. So Shootee is out there just burning things, and he's the attorney general. So he is trying to start everybody on fire. He's trying to burn Michigan State to the ground right now, and so like make a name for himself and all those kinds of things. But the things that when you try to get real stuff out of him, this is a good example of it. I don't know if did you read through the whole story about what he's trying to do and how he doesn't really seem to know what a library is.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he has no comprehension that libraries exist. Probably because if he was governor, he would find a way to defund them and kick them out of the state so they no longer existed. But that's beside the point here. That's not been proven. That's just my speculation on this. But
conjecture.
Yeah, whatever. This guy is he's awful at what he thinks he's going to get to accomplish, And it's kind of funny because the two Democratic people that I've been following is Sarita Nadar and
Sarita Nadar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of them, and actually the ironic thing is we're going to do a segment here, I don't know, I would say probably in like 3 weeks, where we're going to compare the two, because I want to know what the big difference is. They both hail from Ann Arbor and Detroit area. They both are progressive candidates, and they're both toting legalization of marijuana, fixing the Flint crisis, and better health care across the board. All three of them are. Or two of them, I'm sorry. All two of them are.
Oh, no. Well, there's going to be a third. We have to talk about Gretchen Whitmer, who is pretty much the establishment. She's the Hillary Clinton for the Democratic Party for the gubernatorial race, because this is still the primaries we're still in. Yes. So we'll still talk about her a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about her too. I'm excited because we're seeing, some outsider type candidates, and Sri, he's actually posted, there's a lot of money he spent on this campaign, and he's trending actually really well right now. He's spending all the money for name recognition, because he has none, so he has to really get his face out there. But what he's doing is kind of what Dick DeVos did. Dick DeVos spent something like $30 or $40 million of his own money in the gubernatorial run against Rick Snyder, or against what was her name? I forgot her name. I am just burned out from work lately. But anyway, so-and-so's
our old female governor.
Granholm,
yeah. I mean, he just couldn't pull it off. And he spent all of his money trying to do it. So I think Sarita Nadar has the same kind of problem. He's putting a ton of money into it, but it's just whether or not they'll go down that route. And then Shootee, like I said earlier, he's just going nuts. So one of the things that he's talked about in here is he wants to create dedicated reading centers in all schools, staffed with reading coaches. Well, that sounds awesome, but that's basically a librarian and a library.
Yeah.
They already exist. And so this kind of ignorance, or for lack of a better word for the pun here, this illiterate manner in which he is essentially talking about school reform and education reform. This is similar to like the Betsy DeVos manner, where it's just like, I know that you want to make schools better, but I don't think you understand what you're talking about.
Well, no, and I've talked to my teacher friend, and her and I have talked about this a little bit too. And the funny thing with this is you're right. We already have libraries. And if you look at our generation, the generation coming up, right, discipline is a lot different than when we were kids. When we were kids, you could beat each other to the point of submission. And that's just kind of how the schools work. And either the schools failed or succeeded. You can't do that nowadays. People are aware that that's not a good form of treating your children. It's not a good way to teach your children. And so instead of coming up with a new format, all he wants to do is create more money, which I don't know where he's going to get it from. Probably defunding Medicaid or something. Who knows? But he's going to try and take all this money and put it into scholarships for reading camps, private tutors, mentors, all the things the schools already have. They already have all of these things. These exist. Libraries exist.
The schools in nice middle class neighborhoods, upper middle class neighborhoods have those things.
Fair enough.
That's really where I think of this is. It's the key word that's in there is talking about the private. You see that private tutors that's part of this privatization thing that I bet you if his plan was opened up and he was forced to say something, I bet you he would want to privatize a lot of this, and he would not endorse any kind of block grant or general fund for education. He would not support paying teachers more to have better education. A lot of these teachers that are protesting right now and then are striking. This is great news. The unionizing of the teachers in some of the states where they're not allowed to unionize. I mean, the collective bargaining is the big deal. And I guarantee you, his idea of putting money into schools isn't paying teachers better and paying underperforming schools to try to get them going. He would want to do with the Betsy DeVos manner is he would try to privatize or create other make it look corporate, make companies come in that would be tutoring companies, and he would create a marketplace of ideas. But we all know what capitalism does, right? It goes to the cheapest bidder, and that's the one who gets to build that house. And next thing you know, it falls in on you.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that it was talking about is he's going to mandate these kids learn. And it's like, you can't mandate that. If they don't have a stable home environment where the parents are, even if it's just a single parent environment where they can actually be home to cook their kids dinner or to eat with their kids, and they're working 2 jobs, and they constantly have to fight whether they're going to keep the electricity on or pay the medical bills or pay student loans. And there's not a good income earning, and there's not good child care processes. It doesn't matter what you tell them. If you aren't able to help mentor children, why should the state get involved in that? Why doesn't he spend the money on actually getting the state involved in fixing minimum wage and fixing our healthcare system and fixing these school systems that a lot of these lower income kids have to deal with? That's what they should be doing. They should be doing that instead of saying, hey, we're going to put privatized people inside of these schools. It's not going to work. If you don't fix the problems that are causing some of the children to not care about reading academics.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about it this way. And this is speaking off the cuff, but I believe there was a study that explained that essentially it takes, 10 years to build yourself out of poverty. So if you live in poverty and you get into debt, to get yourself out of poverty, it's like at least a 10-year cycle to move you past where you're at. Because if all these kids live in poverty, they're getting poor educations, they get out, the first thing they're going to want to do is they want to help support their home life. They're going to want to make enough money just to survive. They're not going to be thinking about, oh, can I go to college and, bank all this on a scholarship? Oh, can I go to college and have my parents help pay for this? Or can I live at home? That's not going to happen. People can't afford to do that. So if you don't fix that ground level, it doesn't matter what you do with the schools. It's not going to change.
It's kind of what the argument that I always go back to when we were talking about the presidential candidates and the Bernie Sanders and all that stuff. Is just, to me personally, the basis of most of the major problems in this country is inequality, income inequality, and the variety of inequalities that exist through gender and race and whatever. But that economic one is going to be essentially, that's the number one way to keep people where they are and control the system, is basically to keep them at a starvation level and just hold them there. And the same thing with these schools. So what they would probably do is, even though a lot of the Republicans think that Common Core education is a terrible idea, what that was a basic reform to the philosophy of teaching. And I would say that they went a little too hard into the blue book, and they went a little bit too hard into the structured exams, and some of the stuff that Al Franken was talking about, the differences between proficiency and growth in education. Shootee would probably be the kind of guy who says, okay, well, are the third graders finally reading after doing whatever crazy plan that he would have? He would blue book test them, right? And what I always advocate for is changes in what it is that we're educating these kids into. We're not turning these kids into factory workers. That's the way our system is basically designed now. It's you go here, then you go here, then you go here, then you get a job and you work 60 hours a week until you die. That's not what the system looks like anymore. If you look at the Scandinavian countries and the way they educate, it's very fluid. It's very amorphous. And I think that's got a lot of benefit to it. But something like this, like Bill Shootee his plan would never be something with that much variability in it and that much freedom. Even though you would think that they would like that, because Republicans and conservatives like to reduce oversight But I really don't think that would be the kind of reform that would happen. And I think that's the big change here. The Detroit paper, or the Detroit article that we have in here, that one's similar and basically explaining, some of the things that he wants to do. But it's all like a Donald Trump explanation for policy. It's 1,000 feet away and very skimpy on details.
Yeah, and it just seems that we could get a more progressive candidate, right? Bill Shootee never was interested in him. I'm hoping that the whole Flint crisis, as horrible as it is, will at least push this Republican regime out of office and put us in somebody that actually cares. And, that's the funny thing for me. I only am going to support a candidate that actually wants to fix the Flint system and wants to propose a comprehensive plan. So, for example, Abdul is coming to Holland, I think this month, actually, or like a meet and greet. My wife mentioned it. I'm going to go. And the first thing I'm going to ask him, what are you going to do about Flint? And what's the timeline turnaround to get them water? And I don't care about anything else he has to say at this time. That's all I care about right now, because our current administration has done absolutely nothing. And you would think the feds at some point would step in and be like, hey, don't you guys want to take care of the people in your state, for Christ's sake?
Well, Justin Amash voted against it. he was the only Republican, as far as I know, that voted against giving Flint any kind of emergency money. He said he did it on principle. But Abdul al-Sayed, I believe is how you say it. They're waiting for a judge to take care of a final decision, because he voted in New York when he was supposed to, and I don't know if they had come through with that. There's a bunch of people that have been saying that he is not actually eligible to run because of where he was registered and how and when he voted and some stuff. So they're finalizing that, and I believe he's just waiting for a final ruling on there. But he may not even actually be eligible for running for governor. I don't even know if he'd be eligible for a write-in. So they're waiting for that right now as well. So there's the one thing we know for certain, that Sri and Gretchen are for certain going to be on the primary ticket.
Yep. And if we for a second, we can go back to the education reform plan that Sri's introducing. He wants to implement universal pre-K programming statewide. He wants to literally protect and preserve state teacher pensions. He wants to ban, and this is a key thing for me, ban for-profit charter schools.
Cool.
Statewide.
I'm game. I don't know if he'd be able to, because I don't think DeVos would like that a whole lot, but
I'm sure she would.
I don't know how much power she has over state decisions like that.
It depends, because technically, isn't the Republican model let the states make the decisions? I mean, that's what I always hear.
It is, unless it's about something that they don't like. Let the states decide on their abortion rights. Yeah, the Republicans aren't going to let the states decide that. I mean, unless you decide the way they like to go. That's the hypocrisy for the Republicans are small decentralized government, unless of course you're voting to proliferate I guess women's equality and sexual control and abortion rights and all that kind of stuff. Then no, the federal government has to come in and step in and make sure that gets controlled. So yeah.
I don't know, my friend. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources. Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old Atheist Show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes.
Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from Prophetcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around with us through the first amazing segment. Again, we want to remind everybody that this weekend is the Michigan Atheist Convention. If you want to come out and hang out with Hannah and I, please make sure to get your tickets. I think last week we told you it was in Detroit or Farmington Hills or Brighton. I don't remember which. It is definitely in Farmington Hills, though, at the Birmingham Temple Center for Secular Humanism. We have the links in the description. It is a very reasonably priced conference. You're going to get to see Dale McGowan, Rebecca Marketeer, Kimberly Vale, Jim Helton, Kelly Helton, and yours truly, Christopher and Chris, the Chris Squared Cellar Door Skeptics duo. And I think we might even have name tags that we're going to put on that will say Chris Squared, just for the convention. Because Hannah hates that name. I don't know why. So I like to use it all the time.
We'll just write Chris and put a little 2 above it, and people will just be confused the whole time.
You'll be Chris Squared 1, and I'll be Chris Squared 2.
Oh, man. Nothing like taking an atheist convention to Dr. Seuss. I'll take it all day. Oh, man.
Anyway, make sure you check it out. The links are in the description. It's going to be about secular family experiencing awe and wonder. Now, with that being said, there's a topic that we have not addressed on the show in a while. Typically speaking, we steer towards politics. We do some religious stuff, but not as often as we do politics and science and entertainment value. There has an article that has come out recently talking about the atheist movement, comparing it to essentially the alt-right movement. And I thought
veering in that way.
And veering in that way. Yeah. And some of me wonders, where has the atheist movement gone, right? I just kind of wonder that. To me, it kind of feels like the atheist movement has gone past what it used to be. No longer does it seem like the atheist movement is solely about promoting positive atheism, helping others feel safe without the religious community, or allowing for safe spaces for non-religious folks, or even keeping the spread of religion to just those who want it, right? It kind of feels like the movement has changed. Now, I don't know if that's just because I've evolved, because my tastes have changed, have morphed over the last 5 years since I've been out. Originally, I kind of started out being very passionate towards disavowing people of believing in God or gods, right? That was a big thing for me. It's not as much anymore. For me, it's more about how can we service humanity with a secular lean to it. I don't need religion to do it. I don't need a god or a deity to tell me specifically, hey, this is, what you need to do. I can do that based on the fact that I understand on a morality value or a morality stance that people deserve a quality of life and people deserve to be treated equally. So with that being said, right, has the atheist movement changed? Has it moved on? Or was there never really that much of an atheist movement to begin with? For example, atheism, all it is just a lack of belief in gods or God. Or you could kind of classify it as somebody who feels very strongly or completely denies the existence of any sort of deity. That's really all atheism is. Or supernatural. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's all that really is. That's all atheism really is. But when I first came out 5 years ago and I joined the atheist movement, it felt, like some sort of a civil rights type movement at the time, right? How do we liberate these people? How do we make people coming out of religion feel secure? 5 years later, And maybe, again, this is my privilege and this is my, ability to move through life. I feel secure now. Didn't 5 years ago. I do now. Now, atheism just kind of takes a back seat. That's just, I don't believe in gods, whatever. You do? Great. Are you going to use that to implement or infiltrate the society? Yes? Okay, you and I have a different conversation. But I don't know if religion is the big bad boogeyman that everybody made it out to be all the time. Is religion harmful? Yes. Is it more harmful in areas where groupthink takes hold aggressively, right? Yes. But in the overall scheme of things, should we be attacking religion or should we be working with religion and trying to figure out a way to have positive dialogues and change people's minds in terms of how we help humans live and feel equal?
You came from religion too. That's a different area than I did. So religion existed in my life in some way, shape, or form, but it was always kind of light. So in my basic awareness of any kind of atheist movement really came to I kind of tie it into this as well. I tie it to the growth of social media and the growth of podcasting and giving certain people who were very good at speaking and getting their message out there. It kind of all hit in this really sweet spot for a lot of people, and it was new both to you and me, and so it felt like there was a new, powerful movement growing. And I would say that people were exactly in the same position as you are 5 years ago, and were 5 years ago, and they are in the same position now. I really think that they are discovering all of the thinking atheists and atheist experience stuff, and they're watching all of the debates. And it's not maybe as new and as prevalent. I don't know if there's as many, because it doesn't seem like there's as many new faces as there used to be. And I do see there's a lot more of, I guess, once you're in the media or once you're in the spotlight long enough, people have been making mistakes, and we're pulling down our former idols, I guess, with people like Lawrence Krauss and Michael Shermer as far as their sexual behaviors and things like that. There's been a lot of changes to those kinds of things. So I still think that there's people out there who are thinking that, wow, this is a great thing that exists. I didn't know it exists. So they're climbing onto that bandwagon. It may be a shorter ride now. It may be a little bit more filled with potholes, but I still think that general movement is there as for people that are newly discovering it and all the content. I think that you and I have both grown. It's kind of, I always go back to the Zarathustra thing. It's just the camels, the lion, and the baby or the child. Like, we're in the child, the camel, the beast of burden carrying the weight of the world, and then the lion who was just super pissed off. And now we've gotten past that pissed off phase, and we're trying to do something. We're trying to make something happen, because you can yell for as much as you want, but eventually you got to do something. And our method of doing something has been a little bit more towards educating ourselves and other people and getting more involved in things where, we're going to bump shoulders with people of faith, but we can have our disagreements about how and why, and the question of what is, right? Or as Douglas Adams put it, the big question, the main question, the question to end all questions. And so we can debate those and have disagreements all over that. But in the real world and short-term practicality, we're looking for real-world results, and I think that's why our intensity has kind of left the idea of debating faith-based situations and debating politics and humanism.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of tension in the atheist community, and to be honest with you, Hannah and I have not consciously left the atheist community. Right? We're still skeptics. We're still atheists.
We're lurkers.
Yeah, we just
we just lurk the corners and watch everybody like people watchers at the park.
kind of, I mean, I do still have a lot of friends that are in the atheist movement, right? But I've kind of moved away from that. I've moved towards the social justice warrior status, I guess, of atheist movement. I've moved towards the call out culture, the outrage brigade, which we can get into in a little bit. That just feels more comfortable to me. Now, it also fits my politics. My politics have gone from left middle or democratic centrist towards, basically a social anarchist. I'm still a democratic socialist in the most part, but I also have that socialistic anarchist tinge to pretty much everything we talk about. And if anybody listening to the show knows this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Like if you have a conversation with me, I'm pretty radical about some of the ideas.
As Kurtz would say, the horror.
But, there was an article that came out on Vice by a gentleman named Chris Stedman. And he's saying this. He says, too many atheists are veering dangerously towards the alt-right. And atheists cannot afford to be quiet about it. Now, I would agree with him 100%. If we're moving towards the alt-right, or if that movement is, we need to start speaking up. Now, I don't know if I agree that a lot of people are being quiet, but we'll get into the article in a minute. But what touched home with me is a lot of the things I've been seeing. For example, when I came out of religion, Seth Andrews was my go-to. In fairness, he was the one that made everything click for me. Now I feel Seth Andrews politically is way too conservative for my taste. He's just not. Whereas a Dan Arl, somebody who I'd never heard of when I came out, fits closer to my political taste than Seth Andrews does. Another person, and maybe this is an anti-heroes thing, another person, David Smalley, I came out and started working for his Dogma Debate organization like 5 years ago. Just as an intern, just doing background crap. Now, I had a falling out with David that we won't get into on the show because I don't care about that. It's not worth the conversation at this point. Unless David wants to come on and have a conversation about it, then fine. But I had a falling out, and I just kind of stepped away. But some of the things that David's now getting into, that David's now doing, just makes you step back and go, holy crap, how did he hide this from me? Or was I just blinded by my zealousness to deconvert people, my zealousness to share the fact that, holy crap, I found something that's even better than what I had before. And a lot of people, we have a friend named Aaron Furlong who will be on the show later next month, but he would tell us, well, that's just the atheist religion. You're just part of that atheist religion.
That's your atheist morality, man, or lack of it. Yeah.
And if you get into the details of things, right? If you get into the base bone, the background, all of that, and you look at it and you go, okay, hold on a second. Was I caught up in some sort of an atheist religion? Maybe. Or is that just, if we take away the religious side of it and that wording and the deities and all that, is that just a human nature thing? Right? Is that just part of an evolutionary bind that everybody goes through? The difference is we attach different things to it. For example, my brother recently came out stronger in his religion. He's 17 years old. He's going to Costa Rica. He's super excited. Yeah, he'll come over here to my house, won't talk a thing about it. But he's super excited, posts all these things online about it, talks about his relationship with God and how he has to seek God and all these things. He's recently found that. Is it not that he just found something that helped him or he felt passionate about, whereas I'm in the same vein? And in the reality, if you look at the base level of it, is it really any different? And I'll probably get crucified for that. I mean, that's me saying atheism is somewhat a religion. And I'm not, don't want to go so far as to say atheism is a religion, because that's kind of a disillusionary type thing. But I do want to talk about groupthink, right? It's a groupthink, it's a mentality.
It becomes a part of your identity, and we're simple creatures that we're trying to make our brains do very complex things, and we're pushing it harder. Like the David Smalley thing for me doesn't surprise me so much, because I can agree with David Smalley about his problems with religion and faith. I can also disagree with his politics. Like, I don't think it was something that you overlooked. I don't think it was something that a lot of people overlooked. I think there's people, when you hear, oh, you're an atheist, and then people just assume that you're a progressive humanist as well. Like, these are the kinds of things that, the assumptions that are made until something is shown to show that is not the case. And the David Smalley case is he's finally he's got a big enough, space to talk. His secular channel is big enough, and he's got enough followers and enough financial stability that he is able to let his freak flag fly, so to speak. And now he's really changed the the feel of the total of a lot of the stuff that he has into with his politics. And so it's not so much that he overlooked it. He is now comfortable enough to push back against what he probably has thought the entire time were people that were overly, I guess, bleeding heart. It's probably what he would say. Some of those things where it's just like he is now pushing back on something that was assumed of him. And this is who he really is. And we can disagree with him completely and totally on his politics. We can also agree with him that religion, in most cases, is a human construct designed to help us deal with things like the fear of death and the fear of the unknown. I can separate those two. I really can. I personally have never really supported Smalley, and this just makes me even less likely to do so on secondhand connections or whatever. So that's really where I think the Smalley problem is, as far as what you said. You didn't overlook it. You just didn't know it was there yet.
Yeah, and some of the divide comes from the social justice warrior side of things, what people want to call the regressive left, what Smalley calls the regressive left, right? It's moving away from a centrist viewpoint to a more aggressive viewpoint. Now, we could talk about privilege for just a second here, right? If you think about it, a lot of people who are in a privileged position don't take extreme viewpoints very often because it will upend their whole life. For example, my father, we can use my father as an example. I highly doubt he ever listens to the show. So we use my father as an example. He's a Republican. He's very conservative in every one of his viewpoints. And he doesn't want to change because he can't imagine his family having to ever suffer. But what he doesn't understand is he has so much to lose. He's got lots of money tied up in stocks and bonds for his retirements, right? Or however the heck he has it tied up. He's got all that money. He makes enough money to be able to put away for that. Not everybody makes that kind of money. I have lots of friends who live paycheck to paycheck. They just do. It's the way their lives work. They are not privileged enough to be in that position. They work just as hard as my father, but they're not able to put away that same kind of money, right? That same type of attitude. The difference is for them, they have a lot more to lose because that gap difference is such a huge difference, right? And if you have that big of a difference and you're not afraid, and you're afraid to lose that, you're going to lean on the more conservative side, at least at minimal on the fiscal conservative side, because you don't want to lose what you have. In my world, I have a house, a very, very tiny, minuscule 401k. I make a decent living, not as good as I could, but not as bad as I could, right? Some of me is willing to give it up to see the world burn, and that's the anarchist in me, right? I'm okay if it means uprighting, and stopping black people from being murdered by cops, right? Does it mean we need to have some sort of a civil war to have this end? Do we need to have a civil war to have guns stop being brought into schools and kids being shot? Well, I'm willing to give up my 401k, my stable future. I'm willing to work till I'm 65, 75 years old, hand to the bone, if that's what I need to do to end this injustice. People that are comfortable aren't willing to do that. And that's part of that privilege that buys into this whole scenario. To me, David Smalley went from a very privileged position. He was making a lot of money. And yes, before he was a podcaster, David made over $100,000 a year. That's just what he did. Now, we don't want to shame him for that. There's no reason to shame anybody, right? But he did make a lot of money before he joined the whole podcast community and tried to make a name for himself that way. He thought he was doing good by giving up his expensive salary and coming down to the level of the people, right? And how can I give everybody a voice and make a difference? And now look where he's at. Now he's on Podcast One. He hangs out with Adam Carolla, right? He has a studio and all these other things. And I don't care that he makes that kind of money. I don't care that he has that platform, but I'm not going to support him. And nor do I feel that in my opinion, others should either. Because when he starts saying things from that privileged position, is giving him a different outlet, a different viewpoint of things that others don't see. For example, recently, he says that I just had SJW patron threaten her pledge to me for not changing my attitude. She tells me I need to change my attitude on my podcast and avoid discussing certain things, and I could do some good. So what does he do? He cancels her payments, refunds her the money, and asks people to replace her. So I get it, right? You don't like the criticism. you don't want somebody to come in and say, hey, I'm going to control your speech. I get that. That's very libertarian of him. I don't want my speech controlled in any way, shape, or form. But that's just a symptom of his mentality, right?
Well, he's also got enough Patreons, and he's making enough money that he could make this like make an example out of this person. Like, look at this silly liberal. I can make an example of her by ridiculing her on my page. Like,
exactly.
There's not a whole lot of humility there.
Somebody actually literally asked him, why did you have to call her an SJW? His answer was, well, she called herself that, therefore I use that. But what he doesn't understand is that what he did with that is just exactly what you said. Like, he has the privilege enough to lose one Patreon subscriber. I don't even know how much she donated a month, but whatever she donated a month, he was able to use that as an example to further his agenda to say, hey, look at me. That's a privileged position. Now, if he were to at least come out and say, I can acknowledge I can do this because of my privileged position, that would at least take the tone down a notch and make you understand and look a second time. He just doesn't want somebody to tell him what he should and shouldn't say. And I get that. I get that 100%. If somebody emailed us and said, hey, we no longer want you to, do this or that.
If they were paying like $20 an episode for us, and they were saying, okay, now we're giving you money. We don't want you to talk about how I guess neonicotinoids are bad for bees or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, don't talk about that because we don't agree with that. It's like, no, I don't care. I don't need your money. I'm not gonna change what I say to do that. That's probably his position as well.
Yeah. And I agree with that specific stance. What I don't agree with is how he, A, had to label her as an SJW. He had to use that as a platforming tool. B, he had to make a public statement about it. You could have just kept quiet. You didn't have to say anything.
Yeah, it's like I was talking about when we were just talking about like doing donations and stuff with David Smalley. He's the kind of guy that would, if he was donating money, he's like going to be standing next to a homeless guy, like taking my picture, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, this is about me as much as it is about my charitable stuff. And that's just the kind of person he is. And so like, it's this woman is talking about doing this or whatever. And he's like, well, this is about me. I'm going to make this about me. And in the end, it comes off just incredibly egotistical and just makes you a little bit uncomfortable.
Exactly. And you know what he could have done, in my opinion? The smart thing would have been to have a private conversation with her, record it and release it unedited. Say, hey, we're going to have a conversation about this. Let's talk about what you think and let's get it out. Because I guarantee you the lady, if you confronted her, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I bet you she probably would say, well, I'm not trying to tell you shouldn't say something. I'm telling you I don't support your neoconservative gibberish. He's a neocon, like, I just don't support that. And I would prefer you to actually be more open and honest. And if you're just a neocon, just admit it. Let's move on. And I'm going to defund you and you can move on with how you want to move. I think that, in my opinion, that's all she's really saying.
Well, it takes a lot of time to do that kind of stuff, but yeah, that's much more civil. I just don't see him wanting to do something like that.
If you go to his page and look at what his episodes are about, atheist pastor versus David Smalley, cowboy Christian versus David Smalley. And no, there's not going to be a link in the description. You can Google Dogma Debate if you want to read all his podcast names, for Christ's sake. He has Cowboy Christian. Then he has I'm going to debate a medium. Like, oh, good for you. Great, good. People want to pay you to listen to this. I don't listen to that garbage anymore. If they want to, hey, no problem. You get views from posting this, great. But if you look at that, his mentality and what he's doing, he could have turned that into an episode and probably profited off it, and it would have looked a little bit less skeezy than how he did that. Yeah. He had an episode with Jeremiah Bannister when Jeremiah had his whole public meltdown, and he did a whole episode on that. But yeah,
it's like debating the medium and debating on the faith stuff. Like that, in the end, his position is probably a place of we agree. A medium is a ridiculous cold collar or whatever. Like those kinds of things we think are ridiculous and he thinks are ridiculous. But when he brings his politics in is where he deviates from us. So like, I just concentrating too much on him. I don't see really, like, he's not going as far as like what the earlier gentleman was talking about. I can't remember what his name was that wrote that part, the first article about that the atheist is slipping into the alt-right. I mean, this guy isn't. He's not pushing the whole idea that like the racist angle is the key place. So he's not like doing a Richard Spencer or something. It's this weird soft, I guess, segregationism.
Okay, but hold on. No. Yes and no. So you're right. So he's not a David or a Richard Spencer guy. The difference is, though, and he's showing a couple of different examples. One he apologized for. Well, he basically, essentially, here, I'll read you a couple more of his tweets. He says, every American is part I'm hung up on. Of course, some people need help. I support that. But every American, regardless of their personal decisions, I don't know. I don't think they need that level of entitlement. Essentially, he's basically saying that people who flip burgers at 75, are there because they should be there. And we shouldn't have to pay to support them through social work type stuff, right? Yeah, that's what he's essentially saying. Now, he apologized for that comment, but he stated it to begin with. Obviously, that was his initial reaction. He also talks about how SJWs are fundamentalists. He calls them essentially fundamentalist Christians. He then also supports something called MythCon, and I don't even know what letter, or I think it's MythCon 5. I can't even imagine these people had 5 conferences. I've only heard of 2 of them. But he supports a conference that wants to essentially have intelligent dialogue about topics and viewpoints that people don't necessarily agree with. Their willingness to challenge various viewpoints should be applauded. Why?
That's what he said about MythCon. So the controversy about MythCon is they were giving platforms to people who were openly racist, Sargon of Akkad, and some of those
openly
other
sexist, and
all
sorts of things.
It's the whole idea of we'll let these people on, like letting a Richard Spencer into Michigan State University. Why? He's an open racist and segregationist and all kinds of stuff. Well, because in the utopian ideal of the United States, in the free market of ideas, we will put all the ideas out there and we will just disregard and cast aside the poor ones. Well, just like the United States doesn't even remotely have an actual meritocracy or a merit-based economy, there's people who take advantage of stuff, and there's places where some power aggregates. It's the same thing with this market of free ideas. If you give people like the Sargon of Akkad and those kinds of guys who have openly like slut shamed and called out to rape a woman who disagrees with them, like just stuff that's really bad, and you're giving them a platform, that is something that it's like, well, in the best case, what will happen is all the people will say, no, you're wrong, and we will disregard that position, and it won't have any other power in our community anymore. Well, that's utopian, and it's a wonderful idea, but very rarely does it actually take hold. In fact, if anything, putting that kind of speech out there, you're just making more little ones. You're validating it a little bit, and that's the argument against the MythCon stuff.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Wispy Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're promoting secular feminism.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
And so, when you look at the atheist movement in a whole, and we go back to the article that we were originally talking about, right? And we actually go back to it. We start to talk about the atheist movement, and is it veering towards the alt-right? What do people think? What do you think, Hannah? Are we really veering towards the alt-right, or is this just the fact that we're to the point where if we don't start calling out some of these people in the middle, eventually you're going to give way and you're going to give some sustenance to the alt-right and the Richard Spencers of the world?
I don't think it's so much that veering that general direction. I think that a whole bunch of people who grew up in conservative, fundamentalist, religious households still have some of that in them. They've managed to separate themselves from the religion, but I still think they've got their conservative views on society and politics and welfare and humanism. They're different than what we politically think. And so it's like when you hear about someone being a Jewish atheist or a Christian atheist, like you think about that, it's like, what does that even mean? Well, it's kind of the same thing as you think of as a conservative atheist. Most people that I hang with and that you hang with would probably look at that and go, well, why? Because of the liberal ideas that are usually associated with giving religion the full thumbs down. And this is, to me, I think these people have a lot of this in them. It's where the environment they come from. Like the Seth Andrews thing about a lot of his political perspectives and stuff that in a lot of cases you and I don't agree with him on. He's definitely not as firebrand and excruciatingly conservative as some of the things David Smalley talks about, but he's still got a little bit more there. And I know you probably disagree with a lot of the Seth Andrews gun positions. So, like, I think those ideas are there. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in the atheist community, they're coming from that. And, YouTube and podcasting, it's really easy to get a voice out there and find yourself a nice little echo chamber and get into a bubble. And so I think it's kind of this coalescing of what everybody's like, oh, atheism, this is great. And we all found the things that we agreed on. And now over time, it's kind of slowly turning into us disagreeing about other stuff and fractioning and separating. It's not so much that we were ever one thing, but it's proving that it's never really been that way. The old Dawkins idea about herding cats, it's kind of been proving itself of late.
Yeah, and if you look at it, for example, in that Vice article, they talk about Sam Harris, right? When I came out, that was Sam Harris was somebody that helped me deconstruct certain parts of the religion for me, right? He did. I can't support him today because he continues to have people such as Charles Murphy on his show. He continues, he has a great thing. Hey, guess what? There is this whole idea behind wonder, and we have wonder, but it's not magical, it's scientific, right? I agree with that, but I can't support you because the problem is you're allowing different things to go on that are just not correct. You're giving a platform to people that maybe shouldn't. Another example is like Lawrence Cross, right? In fairness, and I'm very happy to say that the CFI, one of the movements that we work with, it doesn't support Lawrence Cross anymore, right? He's had many sexual allegations come out against him. People are just saying, well, let's wait. Well, if the Me Too movement taught you anything, the chances are is that the majority of men, the majority of the time, are probably in the wrong and have done that. And so we should believe the victim to begin with. And if it comes out that they're, incorrect, okay. But the chances of that happening are so small. And so when we look at the sexual harassment allegations for him, for example, we shouldn't be supporting him. We should denounce him from where we're going. And people don't do that. People are not doing it. And that's where the atheist movement is failing, in my opinion. It's going to this, hey, hold on, let's allow them to be innocent until proven guilty. Hey, you know what? It's not technically proven, that Muslims don't kill more people than Christians do. Well, hold on a second. Again, you're using an excuse to promote your agenda, and you're just upset because you're being called out for it.
Well, when you say wait, the idea of the accusations against Doris Scott, we should wait. Well, what are we waiting for? I mean, in all reality, what are we really waiting for? It's going to be he said, she said, until the decision, if it makes it to some court case or if there's arbitration and some money is exchanged hands. But in the end, what are you waiting for? And like you said, in most cases, if someone is willing to take a chance at making an accusation, it doesn't seem like those things are made in false, because a lot of times women are looked down upon and they're pressed and given all kinds of grief for doing something like this. And obviously there's probably tons of people who attacked anybody who would accuse prominent members of a community of sexual predatory natures. And so, like, in most cases, I really do think that statistically, if there's an honest place to lean to start from, it's definitely to take the side of the woman in an accusatory case like this. You can always wait and stuff, but you need to take it seriously right from the gate.
Yeah. So the article does specifically go after and say the atheist movement is moving alt-right. I don't feel that it's moving. I will actually disagree with that statement. I don't think it's moving alt-right. I think that the majority of the people that are outspoken in the atheist community just happen to have a more conservative stance. They may have changed their views a little bit, right, in an effort to allow for people who like them to support them. But now that we're all past the point of coming out, and it's not as unacceptable to come out, and we've made the world a little bit better place, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of things, people are very upset with the fact that people aren't pushing back on different statements. People aren't claiming, or doing things in an effort to say, hey, hold on, no way. For example, Richard Spencer, right? Or I'm sorry, not Richard Spencer, Richard Carrier, somebody I supported years ago, I can no longer support. We're going to a convention where the group brought Richard Carrier beforehand. I voiced my displeasure with that. I'm very glad he won't be there next weekend, because I think he's a horrible, horrible individual. And it's kind of funny because, his answer was, well, why don't you wait till the slap suit is done and then we'll talk about, who's right and who's wrong. And it's like, well, hold on a second. Now you don't want me to talk about it. Now you don't want me to say it. Now there's all these other people. Well, come on, dude. You're trying to censor somebody. For example, Sargon didn't at least censor anybody, for fuck's sake. He didn't censor a single soul when people accused him of sexual harassment or horrible things.
Well, he just made like rape jokes. It's like,
yeah,
I mean, he's just a jack off. Anyways, I think the biggest thing we've got here is that, like, Sargon is just a YouTube guy. Like, Richard Carrier is part of the few who actually made it able to monetize atheism to make it a full-time job. I think that's really some of this stuff is we're giving them more power, is that you can be a professional atheist. Like, I think that changes it a little bit.
Yeah. And that's there was another article on Splice today from our friend Trav, and he essentially runs the By Any Means podcast and the By Skeptical podcast as well. He kind of said, hey, look at this, why do we have atheist heroes? Why do we have these atheist celebrity figures? What is the best thing that we could do? Get rid of the celebrities, get rid of the heroes? I would agree, right? For you and me, I don't want somebody to make me out a hero. I make plenty of mistakes, trust me. And I've made many mistakes in my past, I'm sure. And I don't need to be touted as the end-all be-all. You do have to have some sort of a ability to have people that can speak and help you discern your thoughts sometimes, right? And
there's naturally going to be people that become like kind of like the voice, or like somebody that you follow that's really smart. But I don't know if it's not idolized. I think
we're not the really smart people. We're the fun-loving Chris Squared people, but we're not the smart people.
If you gave us full-time atheist jobs, I do think that we could probably put some cool things out there that maybe nobody had ever done before, because we are unique in certain ways, and some of the things that we've got going on. And I don't know. I would love to see like what you and I could do if we were given a full-time paycheck to be full-time atheists and skeptical movement and do research on science. Like, I think that would be cool, but I can't guarantee that we would be somebody that would change the world. But I do think that everyone, if you give them the opportunity, can offer something that would be maybe not monumental, but really useful for like the whole community. I think everyone has something big that they can offer, and it would be really cool to see more people have that, instead of having all that power aggregated to a couple people who are in charge of a certain podcast.
Exactly. And so one of the pushbacks that have come is from David McAfee. He wrote an article on the Friendly Atheist blog called "No, Most Atheists Aren't Veering to the Alt-Right." And I get his point. Chris Stedman was very aggressive in saying people are moving that way. But in fairness, he's right? I mean, Chris Stedman's right in the fact that he's saying people are not calling others out. We're continuing to support people that are borderline alt-right. We're continuing to support conservative atheism. We're continuing to support those that want to see walls built, that don't believe black people are being killed in proportionate to white people. It's a fact. And so the difference is that what we need to do is we need to sit there and turn around and go, okay, hold on a second. How can we change this? How can we support a more sensible future? Yeah, you know what? Maybe you're not an alt-right person, but did you vote for Trump? Did you vote for the Republican Party? Are you continuing to vote for conservative measures? If you are, maybe you should take a look at why you're voting that way. I don't expect everybody to be on the punch a Nazi train, right? I don't believe we ought to be a Dan Arrow.
Choo choo.
But at some point, we should be standing up, and we shouldn't be trying to, aggressively diminish those type of people. Yeah, is Dan Arrow a bit much? Sometimes, yes. Is sometimes the fact that he wants to go out and completely condemn anybody that voted for Hillary Clinton over Jill Stein a farce, right? I don't know, do we need political change? Yes, but what idea is better than the other one? He's open to that conversation, right? He didn't block me for saying, hey, I don't agree with you. He does block people that say, well, I voted for Trump because, Trump's a better candidate than Hillary was, when you could have voted for Jill. And there's just that lack of belief, that lack of acceptance, that lack of deciding to have a conversation about things is where we're at. And so the problem becomes is that David doesn't like the fact that he's one of the people being called out because he interviewed Richard Spencer and didn't challenge him. He didn't go, hey, you support Nazi doctrine. Hello? He didn't do that. There is an alt-right where Richard Spencer actually posts what they talked about. He actually literally has the whole dialogue about where, what they talked about, right?
Yeah, because weirdly enough, you can't actually find that on David McAfee's website anymore.
It's not there.
I don't know. That kind of made me a little uncomfortable that the alt-right they kept that stuff on there, even though, I mean, people finding out that Richard Spencer's an atheist, if that is legitimately true, would be pretty earth-shaking, I would think, because of the strength of religion and conservatism is so tightly wound. I would find that to be a bit of an announcement that people would be surprised about.
Exactly. And one of the questions that came up was, he says, I saw a report that neo-Nazis are planning an armed march against Jews in your hometown. And this is to Richard Spencer. Do you condone this type of event? Spencer's answer was, that march is a troll. I stated publicly multiple times that I wanted out of that whole episode and wanted it to end. That said, I don't denounce free expression. Why do you got to throw that in there, And so then McAfee goes on and he says, well, I haven't seen you being violent or planning any sort of violence, but I have seen people be violent and do harm to you. Are you a pacifist? What do you have to say about that topic? Hey, David, way to miss the point here. You should have turned around and said, hey, and again, I guess I'm speaking postpartum here, but he should have turned around, in my opinion, and said, hey, hold on a second, Spencer. You never answered the question, dude. You didn't actually answer it. He's not holding his feet to the fire. And again, when we go back to that Vice article, in my opinion, that's what that Vice article is stating. That Vice article is saying, hey, hold on a second. Why are we not holding more people to the fire? Yeah, is it a little extreme to tell people they're becoming alt-right? Yes. But if you're not going to hold them to the fire, are you any worse or any better than that other person? I don't know. You're not holding them to the fire. Either stop engaging and giving them a platform, or engage them aggressively and say, there's something wrong with how you're addressing this. And I've seen plenty of interviews where Richard Spencer has been called out and put to the task. But then
I just think that what David's doing there is he's hanging out in the he's hanging out there in the middle. In all reality, like the compromisers. You had an ABC article that you had that was just the myth of the uncontested middle is what they have in the URL, but down towards the article a little bit they have the sensible middle in politics. But so like the compromisers they'll play right down in the dead center. And what David McAfee is doing in his piece on Pathos is he's basically saying that no, the atheist movement is not leaning or moving towards the alt-right because, like I said a little while ago, it's like the herd of cats thing. There was never any monolithic atheist community. I mean, the closest it came to it when we had the four horsemen, Dawkins, Dennett, Harris, and Hitchens, and that was probably, I would say, the closest to any kind of unilateral, universal agreement that four guys were kind of at the head and the helm. And there's the proliferation of podcasting and leaving the standard book forms for. I really think it's definitely shown the many fractures, and we're seeing the politics lead out. So you can be an atheist and a conservative, and that is something in there. And David is really riding on that. He's saying that the atheism itself was never this monolithic thing that could be either all right or all left or centrist or whatever. It's because it's just that religious thing is there in its own philosophical argument, and the politics is also there in a different place. And now we're just seeing all those things separate each other, and that you can't. There is no large enough universal group to move to the right because there isn't a universal group to begin with, and then it's moving into that middle where we should all give, like I said earlier, the open market of ideas, and we will get rid of the bad ones and keep the good ones by allowing people like Richard Spencer to talk like that. I think that is where he is coming from. And, he would probably be someone who would be a free speech universalist. You hear people that don't want to censor anything. And, you can give Nazis a platform to talk in the streets or whatever. That's the whole idea, the utopian American ideal where free speech really is a universal thing and the market of ideas will get rid of the bad ones. But in all reality, we do need some kinds of buffers. And I think that McAfee might be missing that.
And I would agree. I think the problem becomes is he's saying, hey, 67% of atheists voted for Hillary, only 13 voted for Donald Trump. Yeah, so what? My biggest problem...
I like that number.
I do
makes
too.
Me feel a little better.
But the problem becomes is you're just taking a general statistic and trying to apply it at ad hoc, and it just doesn't work. Is the atheist movement moving towards the alt-right? Probably not. Is there more conservative atheists that are being more outspoken than leftist atheists? Probably. And
or so maybe it's just the right wing leaners are just getting louder now. They're feeling more secure. They can actually yell about it.
Exactly. And so while I agree with David in the fact that atheism didn't have anything to do with the Charlottesville protests or the Breitbart becoming Dawkins fans, I agree with that. But what I don't agree with is the fact that we should continue to not call out and continue to condemn those that don't want to say something. If you want to be silent, if you don't want to be part of the solution, if you just want to be the sensible middle, hey, more power to you. The rest of us don't want to support you, and we would like to continue to see the sensible middle disappear to the point where we actually see a more progressive mentality come about in our nation. And if it needs to be through Christians, fine. We'd prefer it to be through secular humanists, but if it has to come through the Christian avenue because the secular humanists want to stay in that middle area as a sensible middle person, like David Smalling, fine. We'll leave and we'll move the movement forward without you. With that being said, come to our appearance at the Michigan Atheist Convention this weekend in Farmington Hills at the Birmingham Temple for Secular Humanism. Thank you everyone for joining us today for episode 122. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode. Have a great night, everyone.
You've You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.